This episode is sponsored by Cocatel Collective, a strategic sales and marketing agency representing a highly curated portfolio of emerging beverage brands, from premium all-natural sodas, wine spritzes, and spirits all around the world.
Welcome to the In Process podcast, where we share stories of resilience and passion. We're excited that you found our YouTube channel, and we'd love to hear from you. So be sure to comment below and hit that like button. If you're enjoying these stories, be sure to subscribe and share. Enjoy the show. I'm going to get going here. That's cool.
Let's do it.
You ready?
Yeah.
Awesome. Hey guys, welcome to this episode of In Process Podcast. First off, shout out to Jordan and the entire team at Rhymesayers for providing us with music on our show. I'm Thomas.
And I'm Andy. Today's guest is a connoisseur in all things wine. He's been a sommelier at some of the best restaurants across the country, including the 3 Michelin-starred restaurant Alinea here in Chicago. He's the co-founder of Champagne Happy Hour. If you've not attended, you're missing out on an incredible time with some of the industry's most talented wine professionals. Our guest is not only an incredible human being just to know, but he's also a very good friend of ours at Perilla. It is a privilege to have you on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Steve Morgan.
Welcome, sir.
Hey, thank you. I'm excited to be here. I love what you guys are doing. So
Awesome.
I'm super pumped to be a part of it.
I'm going to start easy here. How was your day, and how was your recent trip to Minneapolis?
So far, the day is rainy, and I've had coffee, and that's about it. Dealt with a fun couple fire drills for work, and here I am. This is a break, so that's great. But Minneapolis was super cool. It's a really, really amazing dining city.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have said before, and I'll repeat it and get in trouble, that I think in certain cases it's doing a lot of things better than Chicago is.
Ooh.
Sorry.
We have what do you call someone from Minneapolis?
Mary's from Minneapolis.
What is the term? A Minneapolis
Lander?
I actually don't know, but I just say I'm a Minnesotan.
Oh, there you go.
Minnesota.
No, it was interesting. There was a period of time I remember reaching out to Chris Pandell because I was like, why do they do bistro better in Minneapolis than they do in Chicago? And outside of like Le Bouchon, and now there's a bunch of stuff happening, which is cool.
Right.
But like at the time, there really wasn't anything.
Yeah.
Like,
That's true.
so.
No, I agree. Like, I think Minneapolis, I was shocked. Like, we went there for the first time a few months ago, and the food scene it blew my mind. I was telling you about. I was like, holy shit, this place is just fucking like the omakase that we had there. Shout out to Yo at Kado no Mise. Yo-san at Kado no Mise. But it was one of the best dining experiences I've ever had, and we both walked out of there like, what the fuck just happened? Like, how did that just happen in Podunk, Minneapolis? I'm just kidding.
Wow.
It's the real middle of the country.
To add to that, it wasn't just the food, right? Because you can find great food in all the random parts of the country, but to like have the whole package of food service and ambiance and just the intention, I thought it was really cool. And then you went to Hai.
Loved it.
That was so cool.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I'm at a point in terms of restaurants that I just want to have something delicious that surprises me.
Right.
Because for my job, I go to the same type of restaurants all the time. Yeah. And sometimes they're very fancy. A lot of times they're fancy.
Right.
And it doesn't always excite me. So, for me personally, in terms of what I'm looking to eat, more and more lately is delving into, more and more Asian food traditions. And I like the combination of sweet, savory, sour, spicy.
Oh yeah.
It's energetic. Like it's an upper to go to eat food like that. And Hi was that way totally.
I love that. I love just even the thought of that. I mean, it was funny because I was just watching an old season of Top Chef, and it was so funny because like I think the microphones accidentally picked this up, and for whatever reason they left it on the show. But the guests get up, or the guest judge gets up after like the 18th, little amuse-bouche that was presented, and they're kind of getting up, and you hear them, and he goes, "Are we gonna go eat now?" And the show's judges are like, yeah, we're gonna go eat, and the guest judge goes, eat some real food now, and the judges are like laughing. They're like, yeah, we're gonna go eat some real food now. But I just thought that was funny because like and you bring up a great point. Like, a lot of your, I imagine a lot of your accounts and clients, I don't even call them clients. Is that a thing?
Partners.
I like that. I'm sure you kind of run into that where you're seeing this, very similar kind of concept, but throughout the Midwest region. And so it's really cool to hear, even for you, how exciting something new and different, and getting wine placements in concept that maybe wouldn't normally have had that years ago, right? Because there was a culture to whatever it was, whether it's, Asian food or any other, non-modern American kind of cuisine. So it's really cool to see that. But I want to dive into your background for anybody that unfortunately doesn't know who you are and what you do. I want you to share maybe a little bit about what you're doing right now.
So currently I work as the Midwest Regional Manager for the Sorting Table. We're a small to medium-sized importer now, really focusing on European wines, specifically France, Italy, Spain, a little bit of Austria, and then we do a little bit in the New World. So I get to be in the northern Midwest, so get to hang out in Minneapolis, get to hang out in Madison and Milwaukee, as well as obviously Indiana, Michigan, and Missouri. Always feel like I'm forgetting a state. So and obviously Illinois as well. So
there you go.
So I get to do that, and that's the main job. And then, yeah, as you guys said in the intro, my friend Garth Hodgson and I started Champagne Happy Hour in 2019. Then something happened in 2020, and we didn't feel like it was a good time to throw big parties.
Right.
And he actually moved to Napa, and then, to my surprise, about a month before he was moving back to Chicago, he's like, "Hey, I'm coming back." And so we restarted that with a little bit different focus than it was before, making sure that there was sort of a meal connected to it.
Yeah.
But the idea behind it is, came from actually one of the wines sitting in front of us, if you are watching, is a really beautiful Blanc de Blanc producer from Aviz. And Garth worked for Krug as the national ambassador for many years. And
Amazing.
So I took him out to Chinese food for lunch, and I had 2/3 of every one of my champagne bottles opened, and I said, "Hey, Garth, how the fuck do you sell champagne?"
Right.
Because it is such, it's really hard. Like, I think all sales of wine are difficult in certain ways, but champagne is such like a huge outpouring of funds that therefore the brands that have really good marketing and really good presence are what people order because they know that they should assume that they're good.
Right.
But there's so many different styles and so many different producers. The idea became, what if we sort of removed the dollar cost from the equation to create an educational party? So that's
Right.
it.
I love that. And I feel like, Andrew and I were just talking this morning about this, and it was like, I guess one of the first questions was like, why champagne, right? Because it is, like you mentioned, it's really hard. But for, I think, some of us in the beverage world, it's kind of crazy that it doesn't sell more often, right? It's like thought of as this celebratory, occasional drink. And it just, I feel like people ask me all the time at Perillo, they're like, what should we drink here? And I'm like, bubbles. Like bubbles all the way. Like it's so delicious. It's refreshing on the palate, but it comes at a cost.
For sure.
Is it, forgive my naivete, but is it because it's very expensive across the board?
It's partially that. It's also been relegated to being a celebratory drink. So, like, it goes great with everything. Champagne and a steak is great. Champagne and any kind of food that you put it with works. Riesling works with any kind of food. Like, the difference, especially with champagne, is that people think of it as, like, before a meal. And it's been set up, it's like, oh, I have this on New Year's Eve or a celebration, but it's a delicious beverage that works with everything. And I think our idea was, as lovers of champagne, how do you get people to cross cross that like threshold into thinking of it as something you have with dinner,
Right.
or thinking of it as something that you buy and maybe hold on to, as opposed to being like, oh, I'm having a party tonight, I need to buy some champagne. So so it then becomes, I'm looking in my wine cellar or in my fridge and I'm like, oh, there's champagne there.
Yeah.
You know, I obviously after fasting last night didn't really want to drink, but I was like, oh, I made fish curry. You know, it'd be good with that champagne. So you know, you have to create a sense of comfort. And the first time we did it, it was 6 champagnes and there was no food involved, but it was $15. And the idea was give a focus, have some sort of like story that we're telling. Like the one we just did with you guys was everything was Pinot Meunier, or now just Meunier.
Meunier now. Why did that happen?
I don't know. There's like you think of the money that goes to silly shit and it drives you insane. So we, you know, that was in the background. So if people asked and paid attention to what they were tasting, they'd be like, oh, this is Pinot Meunier. What does Pinot Meunier taste like? I now have a much better idea because I tasted 6 champagnes that were dominated by it.
I love that.
Yeah, but at the same time, we understand that like only so many people give a shit that they want to know like what the difference is. Other people are like, wait, I just spent $50 and I had 6 champagnes and delicious food on a Monday night,
Right.
under a beautiful portrait of Michelle Obama.
There
I
you
couldn't be
go.
happier.
Awesome.
It's a good time.
I want to jump into before sorting table. Let's kind of how did you find yourself in the service industry? You know, when did that happen?
I'll do the semi-shorter version of the story.
Okay.
I was basically, my parents are both classical musicians. So as a sort of tradition, even if my dad played in lyric opera. So sometimes we would have an hour for dinner and sometimes we'd have 15 minutes. But no matter what the night was, and like, even if my dad, like on the rare occasions, like if my dad had to eat in between operas in Chicago, that was like okay, but we always had family dinner. And my mom is a hell of a cook, and so it was not, even when thrown together, it was intentional and purposeful.
Yeah.
And so the dinner table was always, and also the breakfast table, I guess, was always the place where, especially my dad, still, nearly 80 years old, works way too much, but at the time was working, teaching at DePaul, working at Lyric Opera, playing side gigs, teaching students. So it was just like he took on the role of breadwinner and just kept going and going and going. So that was the time that we could always get together. So it was always important. And because my family took care in it, that became even doubly so important because it was always really good.
Yeah.
And it was always something that we took time to do. As I said, the shorter version of the long version. Fast forward a lot. I have an older brother who's also still adjacent to the industry, but he was going to Northwestern and he started working at a restaurant called Stained Glass in Evanston. And it was like one of the few fine dining restaurants in Evanston that wasn't like Trio, which was crazy.
Right.
So he started, at this time it's all American wine, like bringing wine home and like ordering fancier bottles of wine when we went out to dinner. And, as a college kid, making pretty solid money.
Yeah.
And he was in theater, and at the time I was interested in music and theater and writing, and so it kind of instilled in me, like, if you want to pursue those, passions, you have to make money somewhere.
Yeah.
And restaurants, it's crazy. We were just talking about something else, but we're like, restaurants are the only gig where you can, like, switch shifts when you don't want to show up. Like, no other job exists where you're like, I'm not feeling like it. Can I call someone to show up for me today?
Yeah.
Like,
I like that.
So it gives a certain amount of freedom. And so then I started paying more attention. I went abroad during college, and I got to go to Italy. And like my first meal in Italy was in Montalcino at this producer Poggio Antico. It's really spectacular space and beautiful, and having like being not even 21 and drinking Brunello on a patio on like a 75-degree perfect day. Pretty great.
Sounds horrible, yeah.
Yeah, you know, and when you're like, Mom, can I get the 15-euro bottle? Or glass, sorry, not, and it never was that cheap. But that being the case, I started to, you know, see the allure in it, and then finished college, moved back to Chicago. My brother had moved to New York and at the time was working at Babbo. And so I was fortunate when I was going to school in Connecticut that I could like go up and hang out with him for a weekend. And so I got to see all the cool shit.
Yeah.
Like every positive to being in the industry.
Right.
You know, 40-year-old me now is like tired thinking about it, but at the same time, like how cool was it that like to go into a restaurant like Babbo at its height, where I would show up at 4:45 and get in line to sit at the bar.
Yeah.
And the whole, from 5 to 5:30 when the restaurant wasn't open yet, the whole bar would be full of people.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I got to see that kind of food. And every time I would go visit him, we'd go check out places. And I was like, this shit is amazing. Yeah. And at that time, I could eat and drink as much as I wanted and, you know, stay up late and go to bed at 9 p.m. And it was a great time. So all that to say, I really fell for it. Started my first, like, professional job working in Chicago was at Osteria Via Stata. So started, you know, met Chris Bandel there when he was opening that up, worked with Belinda Chang. And she was the one who first taught me really about how wine could make you more money.
Right.
You know, if you sell a $40 bottle, you make $8. If you sell a $60 bottle, you make $12. Like kind of thing like that, and thinking about it. And the more I learned, the more I could earn. And then I took that and actually went and worked in Italy in 2006.
Wow.
So again, my parents are in love with Italy, so they were going for their 35th anniversary, and I was like, well, I'm paying for a ticket anyway. Why don't I try and find an internship? So I worked for 3 months with Elisabetta Foradori in Trentino.
Wow.
And she is just like unicorn, magical creature, making such outstanding wines. And at the time also, was converting to biodynamics, so I got to see and learn a little bit hands-on what that meant.
Oh, cool.
But I have terrible allergies, so mostly what I did was live in the cellar and bottle and label. Yeah, I did green harvesting for 1 day, and I was out for like 3 days.
In a quick sentence for somebody that's listening that just heard biodynamic and doesn't know what that means, like what's your one-liner on biodynamic for somebody out there that's like, I've heard that term before with wine, but I don't know what that means?
Terribly difficult question.
One line, two.
2 words.
8 words, yeah.
Organic plus.
Organic plus,
It has to do with cycles of the moon. It has to do with, all of the things of not spraying plants with pesticides. And they're using teas of chamomile and other things to fight pests. But it is a very labor-intensive, expensive way to make ideally really hands-off wines that have very healthy vines.
Awesome. Which is great for somebody that's not that familiar with wine, but is someone that's very conscious of these things. I think it's just another indicator for something, a tool for people to use. Should they be mindful of those, those processes when it comes to the things that they consume. So I love that.
No, for
That's a
sure.
great answer.
And for us at the sorting table, everything we do is sustainable, organic, and biodynamic. So that really flowed into, what became my future in wine. So fast forward, come back to Chicago. I moved to New York actually to get an internship at Marvel Comics, but also at the same time get a job as a sommelier at Del Tosto.
That is great.
And then start dating someone. So I slept an average of like 4 hours a night for the first 6 months that I lived in New York. But yeah, I really, it was a big change in terms of the world of wine, because at the time in Chicago, most of the people who had sommelier jobs were like master somms. They were like Fernando and Scott Tyree and Belinda, who's an advanced somm.
Yeah.
And, you know, so that was kind of the vibe. You could be like a wine director or you could be a wine buyer.
Right.
But it wasn't the same sort of idea. And I showed up in New York and literally every restaurant had a sommelier.
Wow.
And so I was just trying to get a waiter gig, but I'd run wine programs here, worked in Italy, had all this background. And they're like, well, want to give it a shot? And I was deeply, deeply underprepared. So I would go home every night and study a region and a couple producers from the list. And Del Posto was another Mario Batali restaurant. Sorry.
So were you certified at this point?
No.
Oh, wow.
I've actually never been certified.
Oh, cool.
Neither am I, Steve.
So yeah.
That's a little surprising. I'm not gonna lie. It's like the same reaction I got from Nick Pay when I was on the crush pad, and he's just like, "When did you get certified?" We're like just going down the line, and I'm like, "Haven't been certified yet." And he's like, "What the fuck are you doing here?" He's like, "How did you get on this team?" I was just like, "You picked it, man."
Yeah. I showed up and I did the work. I mean, that's the thing. Like, this is a whole other conversation we can get into, but I had a lot of mentors in my life who were not involved with the court.
Oh, interesting.
And I believe, you know, the on-the-job experience, the fact that I worked in restaurants like Del Posto had 3,000 wines on the wine list.
Yeah.
Tribeca Grill also 3,000, like multi-million-dollar wine list.
Yeah.
So you
It's insane
go
to think
home.
of now.
And you go home and you learn, and you know, as you do, especially in fine dining restaurants, but hopefully in all restaurants, if you really want to know what something tastes like, you go home, you learn about it, you sell it to a table, you taste it, and you're like, all right, put it in the bank. Let's go to the next thing.
I love that. And for anyone that's listening, what Steve mentioned earlier was the court, and that we're referring to the Court of Master Sommelier Americas, which are basically, there's like two roads, right? For most young professionals that are looking to get into wine service is either through a WSET, and then there's the Court of Master Sommeliers, which is what most people are, at least in the service industry, are going through to get their certification. So,
yeah, I think the interesting thing is that, like in all parts of our industry, you know, at the time when I was starting in wine in 2004, it wasn't that popular and it wasn't that pervasive. So, like, it wasn't something that someone was like pushing on me to do.
oh, interesting.
So, and Belinda is, you know, was fairly anti, even though she had maybe because the master didn't work out in the way that she wanted, but at the same time, like, she was really, really, you know, she was like, you learn service by being on the floor. You learn wine by being on a wine list. She referred to blind tasting as stupid sommelier tricks. She's like, that's what I do at parties, stupid sommelier tricks.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I got to, like, Morgan Rich, who was the wine director when I was at Del Posto, was certified, but he was running the best Italian wine program that we'll probably see for the next 50 years in the United States. You know, David Gordon at Tribeca Grill, never certified. Patrick Cappiello, never certified.
Wow.
So I had a lot of people. Don't get me wrong. I've had mentors who were part of the court, but it was really, you know, for my experience, and when I talk to people, not about the court, but about learning wine, it's to, you know, and it's harder now, but it's to get into a big cellar.
Yeah.
And, like, look at bottles, learn labels,
Right.
do research, get on the floor, sell it, taste it,
Yeah.
write down notes, keep going and going and going and going.
I feel like I see kind of a shift, obviously, with today's, it's just like the world that, you know, we're in right now, and in even the restaurant industry. But I feel like, you know, I got certified through the court, and for me, I like, when I look back on this and, like, just talking with you about it, it's like, it was really more of a means to, like, because I was preparing for this exam, that, like, I was forcing myself to dive deeper into each of these different varietals out there in different regions. It's not so much that maybe, like, the actual exam itself was what changed my knowledge or perspective on wine. It was more or less, hey, this thing is coming. It costs a lot of money. I gotta fucking get ready for this. And it was like forcing me to like open bottles that maybe I wouldn't have grabbed off the shelf, right? And kind of like going back to what you're saying, it's like at the end of the day, whether you're trying to be a sommelier or you're trying to be a beverage director or sell wine in a shop, like then at the end of the day, it's like the work is on you to do on the daily part of it, right? Like how much you're willing to put yourself into the book or, you know, into the labels and producers and the tech sheets and all that. You know, it's all comes down to that, right? I mean, that's where the preparation is and that's where your growth is. It's not so much earning that badge and then saying, I'm done with this, right? Because the work never ends with wine. It's constantly growing and evolving. It's changed so much in just 30 years that I've kind of been like exposed to this thing. So it is crazy to think of.
For someone who wants to get into wine and make a professional career out of it, and maybe doesn't want to invest in WSET or the court, what are some like first steps that they should take in order to like go into that profession? Is the first one like becoming a cellar rat and like doing inventory, or what do you think the first 3 steps are?
Ooh, you made 3. I like that. So I will combine what you just said as that's super, super important, and finding yourself somewhere where you can, where there's someone who has the time or the care to educate you at the same time. So you can pull a bottle from a case or bin something and be like, hey, you know, take a picture of it because that's the world we live in, and like show it to someone and be like, hey, tell me more about this. Like, why did you get it? What's cool about it? What's the story? That's number 1. Number 2, and this is the thing that I think is the best part of WSET and the Court of Master Sommeliers, is it really sets you up with like, if as you're studying now, with finding a group of people to create a tasting group. Because like learning about wine is really expensive.
Yes.
And so putting together a crew of people where you're like, hey, every week we can put $15 or $20 in a pot, and one person goes out and buys wine for us to blind taste or just to taste from a region. And we know we have, let's say there's 5 of you, so we have $100 to spend, and it could be, okay, we're going to blind taste, so it's going to be 3 bottles of wine. This person knows what they are. Great, we'll practice that. Because blind tasting has a place for learning typicity and learning vocabulary, whether or not that's like the most important thing on the floor. But finding that group of people where you can really hold yourself accountable and create like a curriculum, like, okay, you know, we're going to study Piedmont. So for the next 3 weeks, that $100 means we buy 2 bottles of wine, but they're 2 different Barbarescos, and they're, thank you, and 2 different Barolos or what have you. So you kind of build from there. So I think that's like really, really important. And if, especially from my perspective, I got to work in a time there were a lot of big sellers. It's getting less and less regular. So the opportunity to have those experiences, tasting wines with a lot of age is hard. And so finding something that's built in, whether it be weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, a group of people you can get together with. Because in the end, you could be like, hey, we're going to go up to Del Rio, and they have some really old wine on the wine list that's pretty cheap. Like, we can have 2 bottles of wine that are 20 years old for $100 before tip and without food. Like, then that means, okay, cool. Like, we can put something like that together and do it as a group experience. And also, it's just so important, like, you know, having partners who are going to be there to push you forward. Like, I was just in the restaurant, so it had to happen. But, you know, we have a lot of life, and if our life isn't 100% consumed by wine, taking that extra effort on our own to do it is really, really hard. So those are like, I guess I boiled it down to really 2 things. And then, you know, if you like to read or if you like podcasts, find one way or another to like figure out how you're getting new information. Because as Thomas said, like, you know, I haven't been on the floor officially for, 7 years. And now I feel like I don't know anything. because there's so many new wines. Like one of the things I always say when I'm talking to people who want to sell wine is that, like, 20, 30 years ago, there was a lot of shitty wine. So you were in a great position if you had good wine in your bag because people were buying crap. And like what has happened in the wine industry in terms of winemaking and quality wine is absolutely insane. And now there's not a lot of bad wine out there. So it becomes something where you have to have relationships to talk to someone about it for them to make the choice of your good wine over someone else's good wine.
Right.
So keeping on top of what's coming out allows you to be ahead of the game, which has been like super, super, important for my trajectory, was paying attention to, what the people around me when I was in New York especially were excited about. And like taking the time to be like, oh, that's cool. Okay. They think that's cool. Why is it cool? Can I get it? And if I can, I can get 6 bottles of this wine and it actually makes sense on this restaurant list. Great. I can sell 6 bottles. I'll open one. Hopefully I'll like it. If I don't, try to get it out one way or another. But you figure it out. But like, it's really important to stay current because it's constantly changing. And we're in a world, especially now, where like being on top of what's new and anything is really important because people have, no patience.
I love that answer. I think that it's easy to like kind of nerd out and be like, I have to take this test, I have to do this course. But the way that you explain it is like kind of the podcast. It's about community and building relationships. And I think that's a lot more sustainable for something that you love and you want to continue like be a part of your life as opposed to like only a career and only your job.
Right.
For sure.
I feel like I felt lucky that I had a mentor that was like offering to me, hey, I'm going to taste some wines with the rep. Do you want to come in on your day off or early tonight and join me on this? And I remember those days of just sitting in the office and just like reworking the book with, Steve, and just like, okay, we're going to pull this guy. So, just like, and he was teaching me not just like what wine was, but the business side of it. Like what makes sense on the list? Like how many do you have of this varietal? Like, how do you describe it? Where does it belong? It was just like hours and hours of me and him just sitting in front of a computer, just like looking at a list and just like working that thing through and through. And, I know that the advice Steve gave was, he doesn't just preach it, he walks it. Cause, our general manager here, Charles Beeman, some of you may know him as Chucky, was a cellar rat for Steve, and talks so highly about the years of just working under you and giving him even just your time as someone that was, how old was he at the time? Like probably
12.
Yeah, I was going to say 13.
He was probably like 17, 18 years old or
He
whatever.
couldn't legally drink.
Right.
No,
and he
like
was just,
20.
but under your guidance, under yours, and you sharing the time to like teach him, really shows not only how much you believe in what you're saying, but also, the incredible work you've done while you were in this industry. You're still part of this industry, but when you were in the restaurants. So I absolutely love that. I want to jump into Sorting Table and how we kind of landed there. And I guess to let the general public that's like out there shopping wine at their local Binny's or hopefully a local independent wine shop. There's many here in Chicago that are amazing. What does that mean to them, the Sorting Table?
Cool. Yeah. So the Sorting Table is an importer. We sell wine to distributors who then sell wine to retailers and to restaurants. We work in 45 states. So there's I manage 6 states. There's people who manage 10, depending on, how much sales there are to be done in those states. Actually I do have 8 because I have the Dakotas. But, not happening. So that being the case, what we do and what the importance of an importer is for someone on the street who doesn't know about wine is that it's really a selector. So
Right.
what ends up happening is you buy a wine, you like it, what I say to people always is if they're in a restaurant and they love a wine, or they have a wine at the home that they love, they take a picture of it. And so the first thing you do is obviously take a picture of the front label so you remember what the wine was.
Right.
But on the back label is going to be the importer a lot of the time, and the importer is the selector. So if you like a wine that we bring in that says the sorting table on the back, there's a high chance that you're going to like the sort of palette of wines that we
Right.
bring in. And from my background, like the sorting table is a super, super classic book. Like, you know, we are very, as I put it, we're very focused on ethical farming. But like, if you order a Pinot Noir, it tastes like a Pinot Noir. If you order a Pinot Grigio, it tastes like a Pinot Grigio. It's not like we did something crazy, which there's a lot of that right now, which is totally cool. But it's like kind of the beerification of wine, which I'm not as much in love with. But at the same time, like if you grab any of these bottles off of a shelf, and you should have an expectation that they're well made, the alcohols are in check, they're farmed correctly. And, you know, part of what's cool about where we come from is that, you know, and a lot of our producers is that we're restaurant focused more than anything else. Like these are wines that, you know, for the most part are only going to be made a ton better by having food. They're not afraid of having acidity and tannin. And those are things that maybe, you know, don't make them delicious to drink at the end of a night on their own. But when with food, it really activates something and creates a really great partnership.
There's two things you touched on that I want to dive into. So the first one was, and I love that you shared that advice because I use that for my friends all the time. The ones that don't work in this industry and have no idea about wine, but they love drinking it. I'm always telling them, look on the back of the wine. I know everything in the freaking aisles are front facing, but there's kind of like a nice indicator, and Steve really nailed it on the head, which is if you find an importer that you really like, just look for their logo on the back of the other wines, and it's a great way to at least sift through the hundreds and if not thousands, depending where you're shopping, of labels on the shelf. And I absolutely love that advice for people that are out there shopping for wine.
I have a question. Again, this is coming from someone who's not well versed in wines. If I am looking for biodynamic, how do I know whether a wine is that or not?
That is a great question because there's nothing that clearly states it.
Yeah. Because I never know. So I'm on my app, like looking at it, and then the fucking guy's like, hey, what are you doing on your phone? I'm like, just looking up. It's like, well, that's what I'm here for. I'm like, all right, sir.
Well, that's great if someone's doing that. A lot of times you go to places and they're like running away from people asking questions.
But if you don't have this kind gentleman or lady trying to help me, what do I look for?
I mean, so the U.S. is different. Every country has different laws of what you can put on a label for alcohol. So, for example, if you are certified organic in the United States, most of the time it will say made with organic grapes on the label, which I have two different feelings about. I think it's actually great, but I think a lot of people look at that as kind of like seeming cheap. But I think it's pretty awesome.
Why is that looked at as cheap when the process is more expensive?
Because no one knows the process.
The process is too complicated.
Yeah, because they
even
don't.
the word
They're not like
organic, I feel like is.
It works for, but that's the difference is like my good friend, used to run the big Whole Foods on Halstead, yeah. Hired Juan Kim, small world, a different story for later. But at the same time, he was like, people, when they go into the shop, are willing to spend the money on a vegetable that says it's organic, but they aren't willing, and it's not important to them in the wine section.
Interesting.
So you're getting more and more of these smaller places that focus on it, so you can walk in and know and feel good about it, knowing it. But it's really expensive to get the certification. The laws are different everywhere, so your wine can be certified organic in France, but not be certified organic in the United States. And so there's a system or a group called Demeter, which you can see on the back label. There's different sustainable certifications that you can see. Yeah, you're not going to have something that's clear
I'm just
cut.
gonna call you.
Yeah, it's fine.
There you go.
time.
You can. I mean, the amount
a
of
friend.
people who like text me pictures from restaurants, I'm like, deal.
Right.
I'm excited. You
Right.
you actually care enough that you want my input? Great.
I love that. I want to jump back to something you were talking about with the sorting table, because I think that this is something for listeners that are, let's say they like to drink some wine occasionally with dinner, but then they run into the problem. They're like, oh shit, what do I pick here? And let's go with the scenario they're cooking at home, right? And you mentioned this earlier because you're like, the sorting table is really focused on delivering people wines for food. And I think that there's a general misconception or misunderstanding that there are wines really designed. I hate the word designed.
That's the correct word.
Right. Intentions are this is food wine, and then there's drinking wine. And I feel like most people don't really understand that. How would you maybe help someone kind of understand what they're looking for when they're, I guess this is pretty tough, but what are some characteristics that you're looking for when it comes to pairing wine with food? Because finding that real, incredible, perfect pairing is the game changer for, I think, most of us in the wine trade or in some way of service. It's what we're seeking all the time. And it's a big moment, I feel like, for most people that don't maybe ever experience that. So
Yeah, it's really fun. Like my time at Alinea, I went from someone who thought they knew anything about pairing wine to someone who really feels pretty confident. And it was very much Craig Sindelar. I don't know if you guys know him. He now is the GM of Bistro Monodoc, but was at Alinea for 10 plus years. He opened Bana Bohemia. Really good dude. But he would come in and he'd taste things and he'd be like, that's a single, try harder. That's a double, that's good. He's like, but we're only looking for triples and home runs. So,
I love that.
you can...
Baseball.
Yeah, baseball. Sports.
Single what? Sports.
But so it's pretty easy to make a single pairing. It's really thinking about what the base levels of the food and wine you're pairing. So if you're gonna cook a chicken, you can go pretty much any direction that you want to, from on the white side or even on the light red side.
right.
But the things that you're looking for making a pairing work no matter what is wines need to have acidity.
Why is acidity such a, it's like, right? It's like, why is it such a scary word to consumers?
Because it tastes sour. It's so sour. Yeah, no, it's that acidity it's not just the citrus note, but it's literally the stuff that makes your mouth water.
Right.
And makes you want to have another bite of food.
Right.
And when a wine is high in alcohol, there's a lot of wines that are low in grapes that make low acid, low tannin, high alcohol wines. And those are great ones if you just want to drink to get drunk.
Right.
Or because it's delicious. But acidity and tannin are the things that really actually interact with the food. Tannin breaks down fat. Acidity kind of gets your saliva going, which is,
Right.
you don't want to dry out your palate and try and eat something dry. It's not going to work out well for you.
Yeah.
So those are necessities to starting the conversation about pairing.
Right.
Then it gets into a place for me where I think there's it's the dish itself. So Andy and I were talking a little bit about this a couple weeks ago, but it's if you have a dish that has inherent sweetness, it can make not a bone dry wine taste bitter or metallic.
Right.
So, if I use something with a little bit of residual sugar, it's not going to taste sweeter. It's just going to taste normal.
Right.
There's a lot of times where it's a really, really rich dish, but it's low in acid. Sometimes that means, in that case, you want something that has the body, but you want to kind of finish the dish,
Right.
which was kind of one of the things that we talked a lot about is, there are a lot of great chefs in the world, and like making super high acid food it's a lot easier to make super rich food
Right.
than it is to do something super fresh, super high acid with less.
Right.
So then we felt, especially during the Alinea times, part of the thing that we were always doing was kind of adding a dash of acid to the dish.
Right.
And so those are things that I think about, and I think a lot about texture. So what does the mouthfeel of a wine feel like, and what does the mouthfeel of a dish feel like? Because there is something that goes hand in hand that really makes, especially from the diner's perspective, or just your own, it really enhances the pairing when you have something that has, if you think about having like muscadet and oysters, it's rocky and salty, and then you're
Right.
having rocky, salty, funky, so all those things kind of come together to ideally make a great pairing, but you can get lost in the woods on it.
I love that.
Is there a proper order in which you should eat your food and drink your wine?
You should eat your food and then drink your wine.
But like,
Best advice we've gotten on the show.
Is the food still in your mouth and you're taking a little sip? Are you
Well, you have to
washing it down like water? Is it, like
for both. I mean, there's not a wrong way, but I think kind of like a great dish, this was something a guy I worked with in New York, Risto Zazovsky, said to me, which was like, if the aftertaste of a wine is in your mouth for like 10, 15, 20 seconds, it's a well-made wine.
I love that.
So the idea is that like a great dish doesn't just disappear on your palate. A great wine doesn't disappear on your palate. So like you're still, even if you fully swallow and you don't, have the wine with it, you're still experiencing the dish.
Right.
And the same and then you have the wine and you're still experiencing the wine the next time you have the bite, even if you fully swallowed it. Okay. If it's good.
Yeah, I always love to. I use this kind of metaphor for people that are not really well versed in it. I always kind of say, like, think of it as like an additional sauce on the table for your dish, and I feel like that's why, some of us like are, we use the term like acid heads, because it's just you were looking for that freshness, that additional squeeze of lemon on a fish or something like that, and that's kind of like a great way of looking at wine. And I think, before we close out, we'll kind of go through a couple very popular dishes that people are cooking at home.
Okay.
And we'll just throw like something easy for maybe somebody to follow along on that. I do have a question. I think this is just, fun for listeners out there that are going to be walking through their local independent wine shop and looking for the sorting table wines here. Or maybe they're at a restaurant. So let's start with the restaurant here. Wine lists. Wine lists have always been, incredibly expansive, right, in the past. And I mean, I think for the most part, your average diner still going out today is still overwhelmed by a wine list. What are some tricks maybe that you can share with listeners about how to navigate a wine list at a restaurant?
Phone a friend. No, I'm kidding.
Call Steve.
Call me. My number. No. But sincerely, I think the challenge that happens everywhere, and especially on a wine list, but in a restaurant, where people aren't comfortable to ask questions of the server or the sommelier, if there is one, or whoever put together the wine list. If there is someone who you can ask a question to, great. And also from, I think, the challenge that often happens, and I think it happens a lot less now, is that that creates the onus for the server to know more about the wine list, or the server to become comfortable in saying, you know what, I don't know, but let me get you someone who can help you with that.
Right.
I think to the earlier point, like not just taking pictures of the back, but taking pictures of the front of wines that you like. Mm-hmm. Because if there is someone who, knows something about wine, even if they just see the grape that's on the front of it, they can get an idea of what you're looking for. I think also, going back to like what Andy was saying about knowing when wines are organic, biodynamic, sustainable. I wholesale stole from Pascaline Lepelletier for Formento's wine list, and every wine, like there was a little thing that said there was a leaf if it was biodynamic, so there was, or a moon if it was biodynamic, a leaf if it was organic. I don't remember what the sustainable system was though, but I think there's sort of going off this. I think there's an opportunity. Actually, Brian Duncan used to do this at Bin 36, where like every dish had like a wine suggestion with it. And I think that like getting people to think about it in terms of the food is one way. Also, some description, whether it just be like if it's a small wine list, it's a cool story about who made it or where it's from. So you're like, oh, I don't know what this tastes like, but I'll ask a question because the story sounds cool, or I'll buy it and be like, I just wanted to know what this tasted like because they did a good job of telling me about the region or the producer or so on and so forth. So I think it's really, I think there's an exchange of information that's not easy and not going on, but also I think it is really important for people, especially when they're going to a good restaurant, like come here. There's going to be 3 people on the staff who can answer a question about any wine so that they can then, it's again, it all goes down to this sort of like building community and building partnerships. Like if you answer their question and they believe you told them the truth and they like the wine, hopefully that all becomes another positive in their dining experience.
There's
and
a
makes
trust.
them want to come.
Yeah. As a former sommelier on the floor, for someone that's out there at a restaurant and is approached by a som in a restaurant, what are some helpful pointers they can at least give some direction and framework to help the sommelier pick something that would suit them? Are there any questions that you're like, in your career, you're like, I love when they ask me this, or they tell me this, and this. It definitely helps the process.
Yeah, I think, so the first and most important thing, because again, I think, I always say, you have to go to a restaurant and order food. You don't have to go to a restaurant and order wine.
Right.
So you have to have, hopefully, and a certain level of comfort where you can be like, hey, there's 6 of us at this table. We're probably going to drink a couple bottles, trying to keep around $60, whatever it is, so that, again, there isn't a surprise. Like the amount of people who've told me about like sort of Houdini, like, oh, we're out of this one, but here's this one. And then it's like twice as expensive as you want to spend. That ruins your entire experience. Yeah. So knowing what your budget is and being comfortable with it is the greatest, because then I can only make suggestions that are in your price point. Even if other people on the table say they want certain styles of things, I can still keep it in your price point.
Right.
And then that stress of the money part of the conversation goes out of the way. So I think that's like super, super important. Then, yeah, again, it's like we're in the age where you take pictures of labels, know some idea what you like, or if not, know names of producers. So like, if it's a producer I don't know, I can, go around the corner, look it up, and be like, oh, okay, this is some like super tiny, cult Napa cab producer from Oakville.
Yeah.
But they said they want to spend $60, so we're fucked. No, but but figure out something that fits that mode of what they're really looking for.
Right.
Because I think again, it's that communication and creating as much transparency in the deal that you're making, because you are making a deal. They're saying, all right, I will buy this wine because you told me this, and this. On the other hand, if you just buy a wine without, like, I think I used to say from the restaurant side is like when talking to somms in a restaurant, like some random person comes in, doesn't ask for any help, picks a bottle of wine and they don't like it.
Right.
Then it's on them.
All right.
Where it's kind of like, if I can get this replaced or turn this into a BTG, that's cool. But if like I can't, then we're having a conversation.
Right.
Because this is $150 I don't want to give back to you.
Yeah.
Because you didn't use me.
I love that.
I have a question I think that a lot of people have like misconceptions about like ordering wine, opening it, and then like smelling it and tasting it and saying like, yeah, I'm good with it. What are some misconceptions or things that you want to tell like guests about like just the whole experience? I feel that sometimes people like make a joke like, oh, I don't like it, I'm going to send it back. Ha ha ha. And we all know that that's not how it works. But what are some other things that you think are common that happen that you want to like debunk or?
Well, I think a lot of people have a really big issue with sommeliers tasting someone's wine on the floor. And I think that is extraordinarily important for both sommelier education and also making sure the wine's correct. So I think that every time someone's like, you can't drink anything on the floor, it gets in the way because, you know, the amount of times that someone, you know, that I've been in a restaurant and someone else opens a bottle of wine, serves it to them, and some guy's like, here, taste this, you know. I like put my notes to it. I'm like, oh, it's really corked or it's cooked and they're like, it's great. And I'm like, oh, fuck. Like, you can't correct those situations when it's already happened. Like, no one wants to be told they're wrong.
You're right.
And you can't do that. Or you shouldn't do that.
Because they're boasting to their business clients. They're like, how great is this, right?
Yep.
And you're going to come by and be like, gentlemen, I'm so sorry, but this wine is actually in terrible condition. I'm going to remove it off the floor. And now you just embarrass this guy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that, you know, some people say you can't smell if there's a fault from the cork. You can, but you should still taste the wine. Corked wine, or, you know, TCA, which for the life of me, I always want to say THC every time. But TCA is something, so that's when a wine is corked. So that's something that a lot of times you can tell when it's really, really bad. So it'll smell like wet cardboard. It'll smell like, you know, damp basement. If it smells like old books, that's something different. But, you know, that's actually like a nice smell. But that being the case, like, those are faults that are very, very clear. If a wine's been cooked and it tastes like port, you know, that means it has been improperly kept. These are also reasons that, like, from a restaurant perspective, that if I tasted that wine on the floor and it was cooked or corked and it wasn't cooked because it was my fault, I get on the phone and I, you know, ask for a credit for the wine or a replacement. So it's not like a loss that happens in that situation on anyone's side. So it's not like something a guest should ever feel bad about. If it's not replaceable, then we're all fucked. But, you know, but at the same time, what's really, really important in that is that knowing what corked wine or cooked wine tastes like is something that it's a sommelier's job or someone who's done the wine training to do that. And that requires tasting it. Also, the other side of it is, I just lost my train of thought, sorry. When you are in that sort of zone where you're communicating that something is off, that allows a conversation. So
Right.
if the wine isn't off and the sommelier is there and knows it, that it's not off, but it's not what they wanted, that creates a conversation where it's like, hey, I'm totally cool with this. Like, this isn't what you want. My job, because I'm a restaurant professional, is find somewhere to sell this wine to and still make you happy. But again, that happens because of a sense of a communication that happens between the guest and whatever wine professional or service professionals there. And then the other thing with corked wine is that, like, it's really hard to tell. Like, in certain cases, I like to talk about wine and shapes, which helps no one on a podcast. But like, you will have a wine that you've tasted 1,000 times, and let's say it's a straight line, like the front to the back. This is the journey that you take. What happens with with wines that have TCA or a related fault, sometimes it can just like dip, like you can miss a part of the wine. And that's something that I would know from tasting it 1,000 times that the normal person wouldn't know. And like, so that brings the importance of having someone who can address that. because in the end, if like I remember, and I'm sure it was the same with Thomas, is that once you earn some sort of respect with your distributors and you're like, this was corked, they're like, okay,
Right.
we'll replace it. We're not like going to run over there and taste it and argue with you. They're just going to be like, okay, cool.
I love that.
And so those terms are important to know as a guest or a client of a restaurant if you want to. It's not their responsibility. So it's important, I think, in a restaurant perspective, that if you do have a table who seems to be down and really interested in wine, sometimes it's fun to show them a corked wine.
Right.
As part of a conversation, to be like, hey, have you guys ever had a corked wine before? And they'll be like, oh, all wine's corked. But
Never heard that before. It's actually hilarious. I'm surprised. Someone said that to me, I'd be dying on that.
Dad jokes for days. But like that being the case, you can create an educational opportunity with it.
Yeah, I love that.
So I like to keep those things around as much as possible, or I used to, because it was good. Like, you want to empower the guest as much as possible so that when they do taste it, they can tell those things.
Right.
But there isn't, to all that to be said, it's next to impossible to have a corked wine with a synthetic cork or a screw top or a glass top. It still does happen. I think champagne, it's the hardest thing to find if it's faulty or not. If you can actually smell a corked champagne, it's really, really corked, because it's usually served super cold, which makes it even harder to smell.
Right.
But yeah, all of those things to be said aren't the guest's responsibility ideally, but they're really good moments when I think in a restaurant where you can educate around them. But again, hopefully, knock on wood, state of the world is we're getting a lot more SOM managers than 100% sommeliers or things like that. But like that, there's someone in a restaurant that has the knowledge, who opens it, who tastes it, who's like, hey, I'm sorry, this wasn't good. I'm going to go get you another bottle. That's why this is taking a little long. Or at least they can turn around and be like, this tastes off, and be like, can you get someone to taste this who might know this wine? So there's the ability to be like a conversation, because the best thing that can happen is that, oh, yeah, you're right, it's corked, or it's not corked, but you don't like that, so that's cool. And like that gives the opportunity, because like the things that would happen a lot of times in restaurants, in my experience, was someone would say something was off or wrong, or they didn't like it, and they would order the same bottle a second time, and there was nothing wrong with the bottle at all.
Right.
And if you don't have an intermediary there who's sort of speaking for it, then you're going to open the same bottle that's going to taste the exact goddamn same, and you're out 2 bottles of wine in that position. So like having someone who's there who's like, hey, like, I'm happy to give you another suggestion of Sonoma Coast Pinot Noir. Like, I think you're going to have the same experience with the next bottle. So if you're cool, this one, and the importance of the downsell is to be like, yeah, this one's like $20 less. I think it's super delicious. I think it's kind of what you're looking for from what we talked about. Are you down to give it a shot instead?
Right. That's some great advice. So listeners out there, don't be afraid to share your budget, right? I
100%.
think that's like where people, all of a sudden the conversation turns sometimes. Like when I ask people, it's like, is there a range you'd like for me to kind of stay within? All of a sudden it gets like, it's like, hey, just whisper it to me. Like, you don't have to scream it across the table with your friends and family, but yeah, don't be afraid to have a budget in mind. I think that's like the best first step, and let the wine professionals do what they're supposed to be doing, which is making sure you're having the best possible product that you can have on the floor. So have a discussion and conversation. Steve, when you're not enjoying a glass of wine, what do you like to drink?
I like Pilsners and Kolsch's if I'm drinking beer. I like Mezcal and gin if I'm doing spirits.
Oh.
Again, I think I like uppers and I don't like downers.
Yeah.
is the short.
I feel like Sams and mezcal, like there's, I think, what do you often find this as well? I mean, I just typically find that there's something about I think it's like the uniqueness of each. There's like regionality and characteristics to mezcal that people find a little bit more interesting. But I feel like, for what it's worth, I just feel like Chicago just never really took off as much as I've seen it on the coast.
For sure. There's a cool varietalness to it as well. Like if you know the type of agave, it has certain sort of flavor profiles. But for me, actually, I didn't like it, and so I went down to Oaxaca with my wife, and I went to 2 places before I ended up at this great bar where someone like actually gave a shit to give me like real education about it.
Oh, cool.
Because everyone's kind of like, you don't know? And I'm like, yeah, no, I fucking don't know. Like, tell me about it, please. I'm really interested.
Yeah.
And it took going to a couple different places, Destilado in Oaxaca, they make the Cinco Sentidos mezcals, which are absurdly good. They're kind of gateway drug mezcals because they're a little rounder in the palate, so they're a little easier to drink.
I love that.
And so actually the bartender there knew Gary Obligacion from Carmel, California, and we like sat and we had dinner and he like went through everything, and it was super, super, super helpful to create an understanding of what I like and what I don't like.
Yeah.
And then there was another place called Mezcaloteca, which makes the Mezcalofera mezcals. And that, again, was another kind of conversation where you show up and you can't just walk into the bar. It's like an educational appointment where you can say how many mezcals you want to taste.
Oh, cool.
So Cade and I ended up tasting 7 each different.
Wow.
And they're like tiny, tiny pours. And you're there for 2.5 hours, but you can ask questions. They tell you about it. You try different things and see what you like and you don't like.
Yeah.
And so the sort of, the details of it were something that became super, super attractive to me.
Cool.
But I didn't even like smoky scotches like that. Like I don't like drinking just tequila.
Yeah.
Like I love a margarita, don't get me wrong, but like just tequila doesn't do it for me.
Yeah.
But now at least it's like a little bit more intellectual, and it's also something it's meant to be sipped on. So
Yeah.
What are you referring to when you say you like uppers versus downers?
I always talk about it.
I know it in reference to other things.
Love
but
cocaine.
amphetamine.
I mean, I've worked in restaurants, guys. No, I'm kidding.
How do you think you made it through all these years?
No, really. So I think kind of I find myself year-round drinking more white wine and sparkling wine than red wine. So uppers are things like I'm making the joke, but like things that have acidity, brightness,
Right.
Ideally lower alcohol. Like if there's great times for red wine in the world. I'm sure there's great times for whiskeys in the world, but for me, it's like you unwind with it, as opposed to like if we pop the cap on champagne, I'd be like, all right, what are we up to next?
I love that.
Okay.
So I think of that. That's kind of the jokes that I do a lot of times when I'm doing wine trainings, where I'm like, whites are uppers, reds are downers.
Yeah.
Like it's a different vibe.
I love that.
I guess I like uppers too.
Champagne Happy Hour. I don't know when this is going to come out, but it is done for the season.
Yes.
And what is the window for Champagne Happy Hour? How early do you guys start this?
So, I guess I'll make some announcements while I'm here.
Yeah.
So we do. Champagne Happy Hour was built around the idea of doing it on patios. It's a lot of fun that way because it makes it a party and less of a formal tasting. So I kind of like doing it. We did it indoors and it was still cool when we did it in 2019. But I think it's one of those things that I think will be fun with the rarity of doing it in the summer and then maybe occasionally other times if the right partnership comes up. We do a class with Bottles Up called Champagne Study Hall every month.
Oh, cool.
So that is, again, not the same sort of party scenario, but we pick 3 champagnes and we usually do a theme. Like the last one we did was vintage champagne. So we, you have new people, so you're talking about how champagne is made every time. You're going over some of the same things.
Yeah.
But then you have some focus, sort of the same idea. And that's $40, and we do that once a month with Melissa at Bottles Up, and then $5 of that's a donation. So it's really $35, but we figure do something good with it. And then we're gonna do. It's work I have to do, but we did Chicago Champagne Week in 2019, so we're gonna try and do it again this year.
Oh, awesome.
I'm gonna get in trouble for this, but the goal will be that working in a way that makes sense for restaurants, that they could do a $23 glass of champagne, which is expensive, but inexpensive in the realm of champagne, because like from the wholesale side, it means if you can buy a bottle up to $40 and pour 5 glasses and still make 3 times markup.
Right.
So it's not a loss.
Right.
So we're hopefully, probably not this week, but I'll start reaching out to distributors to get lists of champagnes that fit into that.
Cool.
And send them out to a bunch of accounts, and we'll probably do, it'll be much more of us being a marketing arm of that, and like, hey, if Brillo wants to do it, we'll take a picture of,
Yeah, I love that.
Thomas and Charles with the wine and like put it out there and give a little bit of information and try and really push people for a week to drink champagne. And it works out that both through inflation and otherwise, that $23 in 2023 makes sense, and probably $24 will make sense in 2024. But so we're doing that. It's a really fun. I've done side gigs throughout my career. I did a thing called Squire Wine Company with Ryan Arnold, where we brought in a lot of producers from California for the first time in the market, like Massican, Dirty and Rowdy, Cerritos, Julie Lade, things like that. I did that while I was still at Formentos, and then I also work with Simon Davies at Elixir as well. So those are just ways. I always find it really energizing to find different ways to do my job that are not sitting in front of a computer or dragging a bag around all the time.
I love that. Anything else in the pipeline that you're excited about and would like to share? Okay.
Not really. No.
Well,
no, there's plenty there's enough going on.
I love that.
I'm going to sleep one of these days. That's what I'm real excited about. I am going to get 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep.
Amazing. Some of your favorite restaurant bars here in Chicago. Anyone you want to plug in here?
Oh, Jesus. So I, when I can, I love to go to Table Donkey and Stick on Tuesdays for their Terroir Tuesday.
Oh yeah, big shout out to Sussman.
Yeah, it's a really, really great program. I still think undercover, the best wine list is still Cherry Circle Room in Chicago. So, and they haven't really moved up their pricing on a lot of things. So you can drink champagne and really great Riesling for like a fraction of the price that you should.
I love that.
Let's see.
What about some wine shops that you love?
Better question. I like that. Obviously, no. I love, as I was saying, Melissa at Bottles Up, I think, is just like a great proponent for wine being fun and wine not being pretentious.
And where is Bottles Up located for people?
That is basically Broadway and Belmont.
Cool.
Knightsbridge is an amazing, amazing shop on the North Shore. If you
Northbrook
want to buy a very special wine for someone you think is very special. No, but they have an amazing, it's the best, it's one of the best
cool shops
for high-end wine in the country. Yeah, I think, I really like the work that, like, even though I'm not a super natty guy, like, I do like the work that, like, Red and White and Diversity, like, there's a lot of really, really great people who are doing more specific style wine shops, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah.
For the Andes of the world, you can walk in and be like, everything's organic. Don't have to make a choice.
I love that. Any personal, universal, your favorite pairing, I guess, or we can do it this way. So, like, as listeners are cooks at home, If I'm trying to pair a salad for like a first course, I'm cooking a fancy dinner for the partner and girlfriend. What would you pair with like a salad? What's like an easy go-to?
The best question is, what does your partner like to drink?
Ooh, there you go.
I think you want to pair to the person as much or more than you want to pair to the dish, because frankly, like the amount of times people showed up at Alinea and started with Napa Cab with caviar, like wasn't my favorite thing to do in the world, but that's what they want to drink, and they were super happy, and they can make it sound like a good pairing however they want to. Okay. But no, for like a simple salad, I love just crisp, high acid white wine. So you can go, if you want to be fancy, you could do like a Village Chablis, but doing something like a Muscadet, Fiano and Falangina from Campania are super, super delicious and really bright. And those kinds of things, I think, make for a good, again, this is the beginning of the meal. You want your upper wine to like get you going because you're cooking a really nice meal for your partner.
There you go. Let's think of a common food. I'm going with salmon. Okay.
All right.
So they're cooking salmon tonight, and they're like, I'm going to pan sear this salmon, maybe with a little bit of butter, little lemon. What are you putting on the table?
I'm gonna make it more difficult. What is with the salmon? Is there a vegetable that comes with the salmon?
Let's say there's a light green vegetable with it.
I like that.
Some asparagus.
Ooh. Well, asparagus is you got me in there. That's a hard one.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be anti the entire Willamette Valley background of serving Pinot Noir with salmon to say I really don't like Pinot Noir salmon. But for example, I think if you're doing something like salmon with asparagus, something like a Gruner Veltliner with some age would be really killer. Traditionally, I think you could go with a Chardonnay, but you wouldn't want something to be super oaky, especially when you're dealing with.
It's like the kitchen just fell apart back here. I'm like staying with Steve on this, and it's like the whole kitchen just fell off.
It's like raining indoors. But I wouldn't want to go super oaky or super high in alcohol. But you do want, again, that's a textural thing. So you want something that's mouth filling to go with that.
I love that.
What if you're only drinking one bottle for the whole meal?
You drink champagne.
There you go.
No. I mean, I think things like Gruner Veltliner, off-dry Riesling, again, like goes with everything. If you do want to drink red wine, I think going on the lighter side, so Pinot Noir, Gamay, and then obviously there's certain people who make like Mencia and all these other grapes that are made in that lighter, brighter, fresher style, but you're really going to want to lean towards something that covers the first half of the meal, I think.
I love that. Light, bright, and fresh. So like some of my favorites.
I have one question.
Ooh.
I'm backtracking.
Yes.
I know that we have a lot of like restaurant owners and industry people, front of house, back of house. What are some fun ways, or what are things that you're seeing in restaurants that ways of educating a staff that maybe you don't have a sommelier? Is it blind tastings? Is it opening by the bottle only and having like the staff tasting it and selling it by the glass? Like, what are some cool ways to educate staff?
This is like the best question, so thank you. I think it's one of the things that I learned when I was doing weekly or biweekly staff education is that, like, if you have a wine buyer or a manager who does it, like, they're telling you shit all the time. They're telling you what to do and how to fold your napkin and all this. So when it comes to wine, like, certain times that's fun and you're like into learning from them, and other times you're like, could this person stop talking for just a little while? So it's really important, I think, to get different voices in. It's one of the things that I always tell people, like, if something went on by the glass at Perilla, be like, yeah, give me a call. I'll come and do a staff training, and I'll bring a bottle.
Right.
And, like, I can do a contest, even though that's not actually legal to do in Illinois. But
that doesn't happen.
No, never happens. So I think that's important. I think, yeah, you want to open everything for the staff, especially if you're not going to have someone on the, like, if you're not going to have someone on the floor selling the wine, then the wine list should be built for the team to sell it. Because, like, if you're going to have a $500 bottle of wine on your list and no one's ever tasted it and no one's equipped to talk about it, then you're never going to sell the bottle of wine. And then that's a huge investment for no good reason. I think, especially now, I think, you know, making certain as a restaurateur that you are willing to spend the money so it's mandatory that people show up, so you pay them for their time to be there. I think creating contests within your own staff of you know, hey, like, whoever, you know, especially if you want to move something or like go to, you know, whoever sells the most of this wine so we can move it into a new BTG, like, you know, you get to take a bottle home or something where it gives them a reason to practice and take ownership. And then the final part of that answer is what I've learned that I didn't do when I was a wine buyer and a wine educator is that I spoke a lot and I didn't ask enough questions. So now when I do staff trainings, I make sure to ask everyone in the staff tell me one thing about the wine.
Yeah.
So that they can hear 15, 20 different one things and then hopefully create their story. Which the other thing is that, like, I'll add that, like, no one wants to hear a 5-minute story. They want to hear 20 seconds to 30 seconds about a wine so that they can move on and get on with their meal. So finding those, as I say, the 2 truths and a lie about a wine, where the 2 truths are something that's fact-based and then the lie is what it tastes like, because that's what you think. So, like, having that as a basis so that everyone on that team, hopefully from hearing that, can develop their own version of that 30-second or 20-second story so that they can answer the question confidently and quickly. You know, it creates, again, confidence in the guest.
Love that. We're gonna wrap up these pairings real quick, but here, I'm gonna make it a curveball for the last 2 because we're gonna do chicken and steak. Okay, probably the most commonly cooked proteins in most households and apartments. But you cannot choose Pinot and Gamay for chicken, and you can't use Cabernet. So let's make it fun and interesting because someone at home's like, I'm tired of doing that pairing. I want to do something different and fun. What am I pairing with a roasted chicken? And let's put some potatoes on there.
Okay. I mean, I'll give one answer, which is 100% like Village or Premier Cru White Burgundy all day, which I would do before I would do red wine with the chicken. So, but I think there's so many, like, chicken is kind of like Chardonnay in the fact that it can, like, goes with everything.
Right.
So you can there's like literally very little wrong that you can do with the chicken.
I love that.
You know, if you want to, like, put something green on the plate and then use, like, a richer style Sauvignon Blanc that'll play to, like, the grassiness and the earthier qualities of that. If you want to, you know, do something where you're using, like, a roasted root vegetable that's sweeter and then you get, like, Chenin Blanc that has a little bit of residual sugar, like,
I love that.
they'll knock it out of the park. Cool. So, you know, I think the challenge of steak is that generally I think people put overpowering wines with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think high alcohol Cabernet is not actually a great pairing with steak. I would want something, and I'd want something that retains acidity. So maybe this is like the Tribeca girl in me, but I really like using Grenache and, like, heavier Grenaches because it's super fruity, has really great acidity, can be made, you know, whether it be in Chateauneuf de Pape and in Priorat, where it can be higher in alcohol and richer and deeper, or you can go to, like, you know, the Vinos de Madrid, which is a little softer, but it's something that really has a lot of elasticity and can be acrobatic to go with a lot of different things on the table.
Yeah.
But again, you know, steak is, sometimes you want tannin, but, like, not if it's a filet. And then depending on what the scenario is, like if I was here and we're having steak, I actually wouldn't want something super tannic because I'm having these, like, very individual little bites as we're going through. I'm not, like, working my way through a piece of meat. I want something that would be not super tannic and probably a little brighter.
I love that. And I think for listeners that are like, putting that on their kind of back burner and saying like, oh, I'm going to do steak next week. I love the idea of Grenache because it's like you can get some incredible producers of Grenache and you're still saving money compared to like some really expensive Cabernets out there, especially from like Napa, or some of the really good ones from Bordeaux. But fantastic. Love those answers. Any advice you could share with your younger self? What would that be, sir?
Go to business school? No. No, I think I would actually say to my younger self that it would have been good to get involved in a tasting group and be part of the court. Or not a part of the court, but doing WSET because the MW sounds much more attractive as like an academic pursuit to me. So I think that would have been really helpful. But I'm like one of the things that I've prided myself on that has worked out well for me is I try to put myself in positions that I feel deeply underprepared and underqualified for and try to figure it out from there.
I love that. Be courageous.
Yeah.
That's great.
Make mistakes.
Yeah. I love that. And just to add to that with tasting groups, I feel like, one of my staff here is training for her level 2 and we stress like the tasting group thing to her. And it's also not just like, I'm like, get a variety of groups, like get some opinions from people. Like when I had 3 tasting groups coming up when I was going through my certified, and it went from all like intro to level 2 people that were kind of like coming up together. And there was another group that I had where it had a good mix. And then I was lucky to be in like, with Dan Pilkey and a bunch of others at the Waldorf. And, there was like 2 going for advanced, 1 going for his master at the time. And it was just incredible to get a wide range of, different levels and different opinions. So I really love that advice for anyone that's looking to get into this as their career option. We have a gift here from our sponsor at Coquetel Collective. What we have for you to take home is a little cocktail. It's not a little cocktail. In fact, there's a lot in here. But this is from Coquetel Collective, and this cocktail is called Cherry Saffron Old Fashioned. And it's going to have 1 ounce of Ryan Hall's Cherry Brandy, 1 ounce of West 32 Reserve Soju, which I'll talk about in just a moment, 1/2 ounce of Apolog Saffron, and 1/4 ounce of Apolog Saffron, and 1/4 ounce of Demerara syrup. You can go ahead and just stir that and serve that on the rocks if you want to go ahead and follow along and enjoy this cocktail with Steve. West 32 is very similar to vodka. It's a soju, and they're both neutral spirits. However, soju has an element of just a touch of sweetness and is actually lower in alcohol by volume, which is great, as well as calories. In fact, it's about 1/3 compared to vodka. They do have a reserve label, which is what's featured in your drink today, and that's barrel aged in American oak for 6 months, giving whiskey fans another alternative, low ABV, low calorie option to enjoy and not feel horrible about that. So we want to share some information where people can follow along. So let's start with Champagne Happy Hour. They can follow along in all the news and updates coming up.
Yeah, that's everything's on Instagram these days. So that's at Champagne Happy Hour. Also at Champagne Study Hall for the Champagne Study Hall events at Bottles Up. Then for other things related to the way too many things that I am up to, at Elixir Creative is a really cool in-home dining opportunity with Simon Davies, who was an executive chef at Alinea when I was there. So we're doing that sometimes. He's doing that a lot more than I am. And then at Morgan Steve 2.0, because I was hacked. And at The Sorting Table, covers everything.
I love that. And if you're an operator out there and you're just like, I need some help with my wine list, definitely reach out to Steve, especially if you're in the, 8 states?
Not if you're in the Dakotas. I don't need to go there. But no, in the 6 states. But yeah, no, please reach out. It's the fun of my job is that I still get to really have good conversations with people who are passionate about wine and help people think creatively about how they're actually going to get people to drink good things.
I love that. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Morgan. Awesome.